Hey everybody, it's Christina Louise. Welcome back to Flourish 2019. I'm so excited, really, truly, to introduce you to my guest today. He's a really special person. I could cry because I'm so grateful that he's doing the work that he is in the world. And I'd like you to ask you to just move aside your doubt, your fear, your insecurities for just a moment and open up, because what Scott Killaby is going to talk to us about today is truly revolutionary. It's a very different way of looking at mental suffering, trauma, and addiction. And whether or not you or somebody you know is dealing with trauma or addiction, we're going to talk about it in a very different way, where you actually see that we're all dealing with trauma and we're all dealing with addiction to some capacity. And Scott's going to show you a beautiful, beautiful path to liberation, to rejuvenation, to clarity, to more control of yourself, more balance, more peace, letting go of anxiety, letting go of depression, letting go of OCD, all kinds of stuff show up as symptoms in our lives. And Scott's going to help us differentiate between the root causes and the symptoms. And you're going to end up feeling a lot freer, a lot healthier. And he's got a really special free gift to bless you and your family with for the rest of your life. So stay tuned. It's my guest, Scott Killaby. Hello.
Thanks for having me again.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I'm so excited to dive in with you. So we want to let the cat out of the bag really quickly. I shared with the audience that we're going to talk about trauma and addiction in a very different way, a way that they're just probably not used to. And then I also said, we're all dealing with it. So let's just dive into that right off the bat. What do we mean when we say we're all dealing with trauma, we're all dealing with addiction?
Well, I think trauma, first of all, it's gotten classified in a way that's too limiting. And a lot of people are experiencing trauma, but they don't know that it's trauma. Because when you hear about trauma or PTSD, you often hear about it in those situations where someone was in battle. They were in a war, 1991, the Gulf War, whatever, or they were abused, like physically abused or sexually abused. Well, we just consider those just very extreme cases of trauma. Trauma could be as simple as I raised my hand in class and the class laughed at me and it left an emotional imprint. Or it could be that, my mom seemed to love me, but every now and then she would give me a look that made me feel like I was worthless. Or it could just be like dad was there, he was physically present, he made the money, but he wasn't present with me, and I felt abandoned or neglected. So it's like a wide spectrum of things that have happened to us that left an emotional imprint. Now, here's the thing about this emotional imprint. It's like our parents did this not consciously. They didn't consciously, most of them at least, neglect us, abandon us, hurt us, demean us, all those things. But they did still do that. They did bring that emotional imprint into our lives. And in the same time, they didn't have the skills to help us with the emotional imprint that they gave us, for example. So let's say that mom, if there's a feeling like mom didn't love me when I was a kid and looked at me a certain way or said certain things or judged, mom is just acting from her own programming, right? Not even just almost on autopilot, just acting from her own programming. But the problem with that is that with that programming, mom didn't teach us as children how to process the feelings that we were feeling as a result of that trauma. So it's one thing to traumatize or to contribute to the traumatization of a child, but then not to help them process the emotions so that they don't have to carry that around for life. That's another thing. So what we're seeing now is trauma awareness is happening, meaning that people in their, sometimes early 20s, but definitely 30s and the 40s and 50s, they start to experience these emotional symptoms, these triggers. It's like, some of the night sweats, not being able to sleep, feeling anxious in certain situations, you don't know why that is, getting sad all the time, getting angry, getting mad, getting rageful. And thinking that it's just the current situation that you're reacting to, not understanding, no, it's coming partly from the emotional imprint from your child development years. We have new studies that have just come out that say we're never conjuring up the past entirely. That never happens. What happens is that when a new trigger comes up, let's say we're with a boss who's triggering us, what's coming up is that trigger is latching on to old similar pain, like maybe from dad. It's creating a brand new trigger in that moment. So first of all, for everybody to understand that trauma is a very big definition. It's a very broad definition. It's any kind of emotional imprint that we were never able to process in a healthy way and release. And so if you look at it that way, then everybody's traumatized, because unless you had absolutely perfectly enlightened parents, then you're traumatized to a certain degree. And that's part of the reason why, if you're struggling in your current life, that's part of the reason why you are, is because the trauma hasn't been resolved and it's affecting you on your daily life.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Okay. So we're talking about trauma. I like to tell the people that I work with, trauma is anytime your pattern was interrupted, right? So like you said, you raise your hand in class, you expect you're going to get called on, and right, but instead you get laughed at, or somebody pulls out in front of traffic, or you thought mom was going to show up for a baseball game and she doesn't. Anytime that you're expecting it to go a certain way and it doesn't, or you're not expecting that thing to happen and boom, it hits you in the face, like even opening up a bill you weren't expecting, an invoice or something like that, can be traumatic, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Okay, go ahead. Did you want to say something? Because I
Well,
keep going. I love this stuff.
I really like the idea of a pattern, because I think we come into the world somewhat, or as we grow, we start to assume something which isn't necessarily true, which is that our parents love us truly unconditionally with true acceptance. Okay, so most parents love their kids and will say they love them unconditionally, but true unconditional love is, I love you exactly the way that you are. And so therefore the pattern, so we get that thinking, we think, oh, my parents, they're almost like the God figures in my life. They couldn't possibly do wrong. They're there to protect me. They're there to love me unconditionally. And then the pattern gets interrupted when mom scolds at me but doesn't explain why, or mom puts her pain on me, or dad is abandoning me. It doesn't make sense to our brains, where we think that, oh, parents, unconditional love. And then we get used to, this is the sad thing, we get used to not experiencing unconditional love in the rest of our relationship. So we've all settled for conditional love and we think it's all normal. One of the things that this work does is it tries to get to what unconditional love actually looks like. And that's something completely different than most any of us know. So, and that's where trauma gets healed through that in our work, through the unconditional love, but mostly through the inquiry, which we can talk about, which helps with the self that trauma.
Yeah, I want to get into that in just a moment, because you had mentioned programming. And I did a survey last couple of years and I asked people, do you think that programming, like programming that you received in early childhood, could be screwing up your life? People seem to be split 50-50 on that. When you talk about programming, what do you mean by that?
Okay, yeah. First of all, the 50-50, I have to say, everybody is affected by what happened to them. We know this from science now. We know this from neuroplasticity. This isn't just speculation now. We know, we used to think our brains were fixed. Somehow something happens and it's fixed. We know that it's very pliable now. So we know that when we're having an experience, we're literally being shaped by every experience and every emotion. And so to say that the programming that you received early in your life doesn't have an impact on you would be to go against science at this point.
Right.
We know better now. Right. So everybody's been shaped by what's happened to them. Certain people just had worse things happen to them, or they were more sensitive or vulnerable to those things. And so everybody has some degree of this, and it's shaping everyone's lives. It just depends on, I think, how deeply one is suffering. There has to be some readiness to look at and examine some of this stuff. So if you didn't have a lot of really extreme trauma, or, you might not be motivated to deal with it. But for those of us, if you look close enough at your life, you're experiencing trauma. So for example, let's say to the women out there, if you've been with a string of men who don't reciprocate love, who can't love you, who can't give you the love and the unconditional love and acceptance and everything, it part of the reason is because we've never received that before. We can't even recognize it. And if we've been with people before who didn't love us, who left the imprint that we were unlovable or not good enough, we're carrying that around. And this isn't about blaming the victim. It's not saying like all these women it's their fault. All I'm saying is that we all have the responsibility to understand the way that we've been programmed, Because once you've been programmed to believe that you're unlovable through trauma or that you're not good enough, that programming is there. And it's actually going to seek out another partner which will reconfirm that programming. There's a sabotaging going on. So this is what I tell people, like this whole thing about awakening out of these deficiency stories and these traumas isn't just, this is so big. This is generational. This is for families. This is generational. This is just for you to live a life where you finally can meet someone who can love you the way that you deserve to be loved. Even that, instead of picking men or women who can't. Because until we get that programming right, and we've all been programming, we're going to keep sabotaging on some level. And that's what a lot of our work is about, is clearing that thing that wants to sabotage. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what came up in response.
No, it's great. It's great because I think a lot of people watching this show deal with self-sabotage and then they keep blaming themselves. It's like, and I want to talk about addiction because I understand the science behind all this stuff. And I know that I just actually saw something about epigenetic scripting. They have a word for it now, that fetuses in utero get addicted to the stress hormones of their mother while they're still in the womb, right? And so when we talk about addiction, most people think substances like alcohol or drugs or maybe gambling or shopping or something like that. But I'm talking, and I think you are too, talking about addiction at a hormonal level. We're addicted to adrenaline and testosterone, the stress hormones, right? And then as we go through life, we keep subconsciously seeking out circumstances, perhaps drinking and taking drugs or toxic relationships that'll reinforce that hormonal release, right?
Yes. Because addiction's often thought of that there's a reward with it. Like it has to be a drug or something that I take where I get a positive reward. Like where I get a buzz or something, but people don't understand that we can become attached to or dependent or even addicted to suffering itself. Like addicted to heartbreak, addicted to feeling unlovable, addicted to feeling like we're not good enough, or to any number of other situations. And so when you look at addiction that way, I mean, look how broad it is. So many people come to me and what they say is that they want to be free of all the suffering. They want peace. But when we start to do the inquiry, which, as you know, systematically and surgically looks at the belief systems of the person, what we find out is that there's a utility behind the suffering. There's actually something in us that is moving towards suffering, actually looking for suffering, picking out those men and women who eventually will hurt us, going towards those jobs where we know, and it's all unconscious. And it's because we have a strategy. Think about it when you're a kid. Like if you learn like being not good enough gives you something, maybe, or being unlovable gives you something. It's a story that you pick up. You don't pick it up for no reason. You pick it up because it serves a purpose in your family, for whatever it is. It's like let's say you're a peacemaker in your family. You grow up, and part of the peacemaker thing is that your family's going crazy, and you're the peacemaker that comes in and tries to make things really well. Out of that particular thing can come a story of unlovability, meaning whenever there's not peace in the family, I feel unlovable. Okay, that's a strategy. Okay, so then as you grow into your life, instead of clearing that sense of unlovability, what it starts to do is it tries to make peace everywhere. And in doing so, it's actually confirming the strategy and the story that's connected to it, which is I'm unlovable. So it's like this programming, whether you believe it or not, it is there. And there's a utility behind it. And this is why people are so frustrated, because they're trying to move towards success. They're trying to move towards good relationships, intimacy. They're trying to move towards a happy life, but they've got a mind, and it's not even all their fault because it was passed down from generation. They have a mind that's interested in other things unconsciously. And some of those other things are keeping those strategies of suffering and self-sabotage alive. That's a real thing that's going on in the human race.
Yeah. Don't I know it? So let's talk about this generational thing. Can we dive in a little bit deeper to that?
Yeah.
So interesting to me. I've seen it in my own family. I knew this is why I never got married and I don't have kids. One of the reasons, because I was like, I'm not passing this stuff down. I know what's going to happen if I get pregnant. I was pregnant at 19.
Yeah.
I miscarried, unfortunately, but there was a part of me that was really relieved. And I didn't know what to do with that because I didn't know a guy like Scott Killaby back then. But that's not the point. The point is that I was relieved because I'm like, I can't, I can't. I saw how it had come to me from my mom. And then I spent all this time being angry and trying to understand. And then I understood that my dad had mental illness and there was violence going on in his household when he was a kid. And eventually I got to a point where I'm like, blame doesn't make any sense because who the fuck, sorry guys, who are you going to blame? I mean, are you going to go back to great grandma Ethel? I mean, there's just no room for that. So let's just dive into this topic here with whatever's for you.
That's perfect because to me, it's a responsibility of each of us. It's the man in the mirror because you can't go back generationally. You can't even go within this generation to fix people. Have you ever tried to fix the people around you? It doesn't work, right? I mean, you might be able to make some influence and some positive change, but mostly what you get is a lot of frustration because you're resisting what other people are doing. The change to me always has to happen here. And this is where you change it generationally too. I was working with a girl who she didn't want to stay in treatment with us because she saw that, well, okay, even if I get clear, what does it matter? It's like, what's the point? I get clear. And I said, no, you got a son. And if you don't get clear, he's going to download everything that you've done, and then he's going to pass that down. So it's up to you. I said to her, it's up to you to break that chain right there. It's up to each of us. We have to stop looking at this idea that if I can just change my family or the people around me somehow, or even a lot of the activism that goes outward. It's like if everybody would put as much energy into looking inward to see what they believe instead of putting so much like political activism energy out there, there could be real transformation on earth, but people aren't going within enough. What they're doing is they're thinking that the problem is out there and then I can solve it. So yeah, if that's one thing we can get from this conversation to let people know is that, hey, you can keep trying that. You can keep trying to change everybody else. You can keep fighting everybody around. But when you change here, when there's a deep and profound peace that you recognize within yourself and you have an emotional clarity and you know who you are a light that changes the world, a powerful, powerful light, much more powerful than the activist that's holding up signs in front of the police officers or whatever. And I mean, you can do that too. You can do that. That's necessary too. But the inner work is where it comes.
I absolutely agree. I'm being reminded of something one of my coaches said a while back. She said, it's all about what's going on in between your two temples. And then another teacher that I had said, there's this quantum physics-based spiritual principles, change, leave, or die, right? When you change, and the Heart Math Institute talks about this. I mean, I'm so glad to talk to somebody like you today, Scott, because it's like all this like woo-woo stuff is we're actually now having the scientific research that backs it up, right? So the Heart Math Institute has determined that every time you beat your heart, you're emitting a frequency. And the quality of that frequency is dependent on the quality of your emotions. Well, your emotions come from your mental state, not your conscious mental state, but your subconscious mental state, right? Yeah. And so by alleviating the suffering by using these amazing tools and techniques that the Killaby Center has created, you're actually raising the frequency of your heartbeat. And so your children and the people around you, the whole world is blessed by that.
Yeah, literally. Because we've had husbands that come here and their wives aren't interested, and the wives might think, well, this has nothing to do with me. It's my husband getting help. And then the husband goes home and now he's changed, and the wife's like, what happened to you? And then wife has to come here. So it's literally contagious. Now, here's another thing we now know. Emotions are contagious. A new study that came out, all of us who are intuitive already knew that, or empathic, but now they're studying how emotions are contagious. But what's also contagious is transformation. So when one person transforms within a family, it changes the dynamic in the family, so that other people have to either adjust to that or they have to transform themselves or they're going to suffer. So again, it goes back to taking care of things from within. That's how you change your family. It's attraction, not promotion, as they say in AA. Attraction means Just transform yourself. Don't promote what you're doing. Just show up in the new way that you're showing up after doing deep work, and that's going to change the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. In Buddhism, they call it doing, non-doing. I study the I Ching too. They talk about doing, non-doing. People are always like, well, I have this healing and I've had this awakening and I got to go tell everybody. And that's what I did when I was a kid. I went vegan at a very early age. I started getting involved in like juicing and supplementation and spirituality and universal law and quantum physics and all of that. And so I went to my parents and I went to my friends and I went to my family and I'm like, you've got to do this too. And it's so much better over here. And they're like, get the F away from me. Leave me alone. And I hated it because I was like, you're just treating me like I'm that kid that messed up and you don't appreciate. And I spent years in that prison of like trying to change them and, let's be honest, control them and manipulate them for their own good. And it wasn't until one of my teachers, I got on my phone with the teacher one time and I said, I don't understand what the problem is. I don't want to argue with these people. He said, what do you want? You know, like, what do you want? Can you give it to yourself? Can you let them off the hook? Can you see that it's not your job to do this? And I was like, F you, and wanted to hang up the phone, but I didn't. And so instead I sat at the edge of my bed and I'm like, all right, God help me let them off the hook. God help me take all of that energy, like you were saying, take all that energy that I'm trying to change and that was the other thing. I was a big activist when I was a kid. Change the world, end the war. Don't do that with my tax dollars. You should do it this way, to my parents. And the minute, I'm telling you, it took 2 weeks of me closing my mouth, turning my energy back in. Now, 10 years later, my mom's calling me with Wayne Dyer quotes and asking me what supplement I take and who my functional doctor is. And I'm like, okay, I stopped trying to change them, focused on myself, and now they're coming to me for advice.
Brilliant. I have a million stories like that, but here's a real quick one. I'm in a new relationship. It's almost 2 years old. When I first started the relationship, he was much younger than me, he happens to be a guy. And I was trying to get him interested in my inquiry work. And he was mildly interested, but because I was pressuring him, because whenever you're pressured, it feels like someone's proselytizing. There's almost a resistance to pressure. It's like, even if it's pressure that's like, oh, this can benefit you, it's still almost like the ego says no, no, no. It tries to fight it. But so I just dropped. I dropped trying to get him to do it, and I just kept doing the work myself. And all of a sudden, he became attracted to it. And all of a sudden, now he does it, and now he's getting certified as facilitator because I got out of the way and just stuck with looking at myself, including, like you said, what is it in me that needed him to do that? What was it that I was trying to do? And there was an agenda behind that didn't need to be there. I needed to work on myself. And then once I worked on myself in that relationship, he starts coming and wanting to transform. So it's beautiful. And that's how it works, just like that.
Mm-hmm. So what can you tell us about inquiry? Because I'm not sure that everybody knows what you mean by that.
So inquiry is, if you're familiar with meditation and mindfulness, it takes elements of that, but it adds to it. So with mindfulness and meditation, you're learning, instead of thinking or ruminating on an issue, you observe, to look from awareness to observe thoughts and feelings and sensations coming and going within your awareness. So if you think about it this way real quick, just on that point, most people, what happens is, like, the tax bill comes in, right? Like you say, the tax bill comes in, and then they're not getting into mindfulness as soon as that they open that envelope. They're not just watching the scary thoughts go, but what they're doing is they're thinking the scary thoughts, and they're ruminating on what bad could happen, and their body starts to feel anxiety, right? That's the normal state of how humans process things. With mindfulness, you teach people to start observing those thoughts in a skillful way so that you don't hook into them, especially the non-functioning thoughts, just the scary thoughts. And you learn how to bring them down into the body to release the fear there. Okay, so that's just normal meditation and mindfulness. What we've done is we've added in some very penetrative questions and techniques that help people go deeper. So without giving away all of it, essentially, for example, if someone comes to us and they say, I feel like I'm just not good enough as a parent. Okay, so they might be aware of that on some conscious level, but they're not aware of all of the beliefs and the words and the pictures that are packed into that, because it's a lifetime of believing that. And so a lot of that stuff goes into our unconscious. We can't even see it. So with normal meditation and mindfulness, you can't get to the unconscious very well because it's not conscious. You can only, in meditation, you can only be aware of what you're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff, like these traumas, these deep emotional issues, often hide below the radar. We've developed a methodology that pulls them up into your awareness so you can see them, and then unsticks, if that's the right word, is unvelcros the thoughts that come up out of that from the body, emotions, and sensations. So it's as simple as this, taking you back to the bill thing. So I get the bill in the mail. Instead of doing the normal way of thinking and worrying, you just watch the thoughts. There's a few questions that you can ask, which actually help you let go of the thoughts. You get into the body. But let's say there's one really, really sticky thought, like I'm going to be poor. If I don't, my bills paid, I'm going to be on the street. I'm going to be homeless. So those are really sticky, almost traumatic thoughts. We have ways of going in there to unhook you from the thought. There's just a bunch of ways we do. So we call it advanced mindfulness because it's more advanced than just watching thoughts. Because so much is unconscious. This is the thing that we've learned in our program. So much of human suffering is unconscious. We may have an inkling as to why we're suffering or not at peace or not happy, but we don't truly know until you pull it out of the unconscious, what's truly operating in our operating system. So our work does that. It pulls it out of the unconscious and then helps it dissolve away so that we can start living in the moment, not in the past and the future, taking action, living in the flow of the present moment rather than worry, ruminating in the past, anger, resentment, shame, all that stuff.
In your inquiry work, are people making the matches between getting the tax bill today and something that happened in early childhood, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting, sometimes there's a connection, often there is a connection because like if this is the way trauma works, like I had a father who would come home. I have the best dad in the world, frankly. So even saying anything like this doesn't.
I know.
Yeah,
You're like, oh.
No, because he was so awesome. But one thing he would do is come home every day and he would say, I don't know how I'm going to make it. He had a hardware store. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills this month. That was actually traumatizing and shaped me. So, for example, for many years when I would open up bills, I would get that old conditioning from dad pouring in there. So yeah, almost everything has a link to the past because nothing exists in a vacuum. It's not like I'm going to get upset right now over Mickey Mouse for no reason. If I'm going to get upset over Mickey Mouse, it's probably because something happened at Disney World when I was 12,
Oh my God. I have to share this, that you brought up Mickey Mouse. That is hilarious. I was not planning this at all. Are you going to come back? So check this out. So I kept experiencing for the last 30 years, every time I would have to get into a bathing suit or want to get into a bathing suit, there'd be like a panic and a freak out. And I always thought to address it on the physical level, I got to lose weight or I got to firm up or I got to go talk to a counselor about why I don't like my body or I'm scared that guys are going to rape me. And there was some of that in there too, but I just couldn't understand why I felt more comfortable naked than I did in a bathing suit. And again, I just kept addressing it on a physical level and not getting anywhere. So finally, just not too long ago, was like, that's it. I'm going to look at this issue until I find this out. Because what I realized, Scott, is that I always use that excuse that it was like body image stuff. Like, oh, I just don't feel comfortable or I got to lose more weight. But I actually started to find pictures as I got older and this pattern took shape over years. I saw these pictures of me when I'm like, oh, I could have totally rocked a bathing suit. I would have been fine in but I never saw it. So I knew it wasn't just physical. Long story short, I went in and did some inquiry and realized, and I didn't even remember this consciously, but when I was 6 years old was the first time my parents ever took me to go and buy a bathing suit. All the bathing suits from the years before were given to me. They were gifts. They just showed up. But it was the first time that I got to go with my mom. We picked out a Mickey and Minnie Mouse bathing suit.
Nice.
My whole life, I've hated Disney, by the way.
Okay.
And I'm not saying they're a perfect corporation, but it was like I hate them. And so I picked out this Mickey and Minnie Mouse bathing suit. And we went to a theme park and my family was there and everybody's like, oh, look at your bathing suit. It's so cute, Christina. Look at how cute you look in a bathing suit. All day I'm eating funnel cake. I'm in the sun. I'm super tired. We're leaving the park. And I realized I left the bathing suit in a locker.
Mm.
And when I told my dad that I left the bathing suit in the locker, he looked at me and said, "Oh, well, too bad. You got to learn how to take better care of your things. We're not going back for your bathing suit." And it was this punitive, condemning look and tone.
Yeah.
And from that moment on,
There you
I
go.
formed a belief, that was trauma for me. I formed a belief that I didn't deserve to look good in a bathing suit.
Right.
And it haunted me for over 30 freaking years.
That's just
I cleared
incredible.
that
Right.
the way that you're, it's a very similar way to what you're talking about today. And now I was rocking a bathing suit 2 nights ago.
Right.
I got fine.
There you go. Perfect example of how something innocuous like Disney World could create a trauma. That's just, and it stuck with you for that long. So that's an
Yeah.
example. And just so everybody listening should just pay attention to that story and understand that nothing happens in a vacuum. And the fact what you're getting upset or stressed about today does have a link to the past. It's not happening in a vacuum. And to understand the link, even to understand it intellectually often is not enough, because you have to clear the emotional charge around it. There's emotional charge around these memories. It's not just about going back and thinking, okay, that was okay. Sometimes that works. Like, it's okay that happened. But because so much of it's held in the body, you must have done work to release some of those feelings around. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very deep, and that's why you need support, guys. And so we want to make it easy for you to stay connected to Scott, to receive more value from Scott. The other thing that I like that we didn't get a chance to touch on in today's talk is Scott has 2 beautiful, beautiful centers out there in California where people are flying in from all over the world, receiving one-on-one support from him and his certified facilitators. They're changing their family trees. They're breaking generational curses. They're dealing with people who have substance, like real life, like I'm addicted to a substance, but they're also just helping people deal with getting free from mental suffering, getting free from these traumas, getting free from the addiction to the suffering and the anger itself. And so we want to make it really easy for you to stay connected with Scott today. And that's why we've got his free gift linked in the email we sent you. It's on the speaker page. You want to go ahead and take advantage of it. It's going to help you heal from victimhood. It's going to give you daily guidance, mindfulness skills, practical tools and techniques, simple but truly transformative practices and tools and techniques that you can keep in your pocket and be blessed with for the rest of your life. And hopefully you share them with the important people in your life so we can all be free from suffering. You deserve to feel good. No matter what you've done or what's been happened to you, you definitely deserve to feel good. And I want to make sure that you get the support that you need today. So you can just go ahead below, click the link below this video, enter your name and your email address, and Scott will send you that information right away. Scott, thank you so much for being with us here today. Is there anything you want to say before we close?
No, just in case people are interested in the Killaby Center, it's KillabyCenter.com. And if people just want to explore me more, you could go to Killaby.com, which is my site. But if you go to the Scott Killaby public page, that's everything is listed there. Everything we're doing is listed there. It's the best source for that. So
We'll make sure that those links are available right here on the speaker page, so you guys can just play with those, click those, enjoy, indulge, share. We all deserve freedom from mental suffering, and mental suffering is what leads to substance abuse and what people consider to be real addiction. So I love how you're treating root causes and not just symptoms. And we had talked about it before, but you and I are on the same page where, it's the emotions, it's the traumas that drive people to drink excessively or to smoke, whatever they're doing. Right. That's not a real problem. That's a symptom. And right. Scott Killaby and his certified facilitators are here to help you get clear of those root cause problems and set yourself and your family free for generations to come.
Right. Thank you so much for explaining it.
Thank you. Bless you. All right, guys, thanks so much. I'll see you tomorrow with another amazing, powerful talk. Make sure that you're sharing these talks with the people that you love, that you're giving them the link to our opt-in page. And I'll see you back here on your couch tomorrow morning with your favorite beverage. Bye.